Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond-producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109-carat diamond, recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior, with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mish Shedlock, editor of Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis that you can find on MishTalk.com. Welcome back to the show, Mish.
Hey, a pleasure to be back on.
Boy, the most hated presidential candidates ever between Hillary and Donald. Who do we hate the most?
Right, it's neck and neck here. It's neck and neck. The Washington Post came out with a new poll today that shows a record number of Americans now dislike Hillary Clinton. Now, the weird thing about this, her favorable rating dropped to 45% from 54%, but and from Hispanics 71 to 55 and liberals 76 to 63. So something's clearly happened here after the nomination process. But the interesting thing is, if we look just at registered voters, these are actually people who can vote. The unfavorable rating for Clinton, unfavorable now, is 59%, and for Trump, 60%. So it's neck and neck. These were, except for Trump, Hillary would be the most unpopular presidential candidate in history, and among registered voters, there's only one difference between the two of them.
Does this mean people are not going to bother to vote?
I suspect we're going to see some of that. I don't know how much. In some states, the independent candidates, Johnson, Libertarian, and some others, we've got a Green Party of sorts here running somewhere, their support is close to 20%. So it's going to depend, actually, on how they break. And when I look at these states, I posted a chart that Nate Silver had out there. You know, he said that on August 14th that Hillary had an 89% chance of winning. Trump was 10.8. And I looked at that, and I said at the time it was crazy, and I posted it again today that's crazy. This is not a ping pong match. This is or a tennis match between players of known skill levels, where, you know, one is clearly better than the other, and on any given day, you know, one can, you know, rise above expectations or play below expectations, whatever. We're dealing with sentiment among voters. There's an emotion factor here, and there's an emotion factor over time. The further away we are from an event, someone's tennis skills are not going to change 3 months from now. If there's a match 3 months from now, someone might get injured, but, you know, barring injury, skills are not going to change looking ahead 3 months. Attitudes can change rapidly. The further we are away from an event that deals with consumer attitudes, the less likely one should be. So a 90% confidence level that someone's going to, you know, win that far, you know, in advance in a two-way match, well, I think it's crazy.
Well, with such a dearth of real candidates, Is this going to be an election that most people consider to be a joke, and would they want a recall?
Well, there's no provision for a recall here other than impeachment, and we don't have any grounds for impeachment yet. When we've had grounds for them, we didn't have it, and we had an impeachment of Clinton on absolutely Bill Clinton on absolutely silly ground. So no, there's no provision for recall. We're going to be stuck with one of these people for 4 years, and that's what voters have to decide here. Now, who do they want to be stuck with? The voters clearly don't like either of these people, and so how are they going to vote? And it's going to come down to something, possibly something that we cannot even foresee right now. Trump might say, he continues to say something stupid, which got him into hot water here. But now, just all of a sudden, out of the blue, Hillary's odds allegedly swung from like 90% down to like 20 to 75%. Did anything change? I don't think so. So why can't things continue in the direction that they're going now? And in fact, I expect them to continue in the direction they're going now. I expect these odds are going to tighten considerably. We're going to see 60-40 or 50-50 maybe by the time this thing is done, and it's going to come down to whoever can win the marginal state, and the marginal state could conceivably be Nevada.
So could you see people actually going into the voting booth, holding their nose and shutting their eyes and just kind of stabbing the tab?
Well, they won't be doing that, but they might be thinking that. That's exactly what they're going to be thinking, Jim. Why do I like any of these? And they're going to stay away. And so a lot of people are going to stay away. And there were a lot of millennials who were going to vote for, that wanted Bernie Sanders, now have to decide between two people they don't like at all. Those are the people most likely to stay away, and most likely they're leaning towards Hillary. So, what does that say? That says right there this thing's going to be a lot tighter than most people think.
Well, polls, too, can be so deceiving. In British Columbia, where I live, going into the last provincial election, the opposition had a 22% lead in the polls going in, but the final result was an overwhelming majority for the government. Look at Brexit. They said, the odds of a Brexit vote were 14%. Mm-hmm. Who set the odds? And polls, I think, are very deceptive. And I think in the case of Trump supporters, perhaps publicly they're ashamed to say they support him.
Exactly.
But privately they do.
That is exactly correct. I think we're going to see that. In the case of Brexit, bettors set the odds. I mean, when we're looking at the odds for Brexit, bettors were setting the odds. Now here, we're not looking at bets. We're looking at Nate Silver's projections with no bets. I've not looked to see the official line. There probably is one in Las Vegas somewhere. But the Brexit was, just based on odds. And bettors thought, that Brexit would lose. Well, guess what? The more people voted at the booth than they put with their money. And it was a lot of allegedly smart money that said in the end the government gets what it wants. Well, it didn't.
And I've seen polls now from Britain where people think Brexit will be a good thing. Britain's new Prime Minister, May, says we're going to make this thing work, and our number one priority is immigration control.
Yes, exactly. So it's funny how all these predictions of Armageddon, never came into being at all. So Europe still has a lot of problems. I think Brexit is going to cause problems, but it's going to cause more problems for the EU than it did for the UK.
Well, speaking of problems, all the predicted disasters for the Rio Olympics never happened. They got the games on. Yes, they had trouble getting people into venues, but the security disaster that they predicted, Zika, didn't happen. It seems to me that momentum sometimes of an event or of a people just carries on regardless of what the government does or doesn't do.
Yeah, a lot of, I mean, and look back to December. We had a lot of predictions that the stock market would collapse this year. I had someone tell me, Mish, you know this is going to happen. And I said, well, we don't know this at all. And, you know, my likely scenario actually was that the stock market doesn't do anything for a number of years, and that alone would destroy pension plans. So, we'll see. We've got a hike, you know, coming up. There's all this discussion of hikes. You know, how many times have you know, the Fed come out and said, you know, they're going to hike this year? The projection back in December was we would actually have 4 hikes this year. 4. So far we've had none. If the jobs report on Friday is not any good, they're not going to hike in September. And right now the odds are up a bit, but they're still saying September odds are only 70-some%. Unless the jobs report is really good on Friday, we're going to see the market saying that there's a 70% chance or so the Fed doesn't hike, and if it's bad, we're going to see something like a 90% chance the Fed won't hike, and the Fed's not going to hike. And then we'll play the same game again in November and December. Meanwhile, one of the most astonishing comments, you know, from the Fed came out yesterday. Fisher, the president of the New York Fed, came out and was saying that he thought negative interest rates were working well. And I'm wondering, you know, on what planet is this guy on if he actually thinks these things are working well? We got a banking crisis going on in Europe, and it's specifically because of negative interest rates. Banks, unlike the U.S., where the Fed actually pays banks, you know, to hold excess reserves, they charge them for them in the EU, and it's really crippled the banking sector there.
Well, that's what happens with negative interest rates. I mean, I think there's a reason why in human history we never had them before, because they don't work. Well,
the whole idea is crazy. The negative interest rates imply that someone would rather have 90 cents tomorrow than $1 today. And that's crazy. From a time preference standpoint, that mathematically can never happen that way. But, you know, here we are. That is exactly where we're at here. And I was looking for the comment that Fisher made that was like incredibly telling, and I just found it. Here he says, basically we think they were quite successful, but that wasn't the comment that I wanted. Here it is. We're dealing with interconnectedness, and he just went on, you know, rambling about how these things seem to work when they clearly do not work. You know, but here's the comment. Their negative rates are difficult for savers, but, quote, they go along quite decent with equity prices, unquote. So here he is. He's praising negative interest rates for the boost that they've delivered in the stock market. Now, we all knew that this was going on, Jim, but I did not expect the New York Fed president to come out and say, well, this is lovely because it's boosting equity prices. Now, who owns equity? And it's bad for savers. So, who are the savers? Well, the savers are the people on fixed income living paycheck to paycheck, who actually welcome food prices to go down, and they don't own stocks. But, hey, we heard it here from the New York Fed. Negative interest rates go along quite decent with equity prices. Amazing. I was actually surprised that he said that.
We'll have more with Mish Shedlock right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mike Shedlock. Mish, the aero industry seems to be in some trouble. You're saying the axe is about to fall at Honeywell and Boeing.
Yeah, I've got a someone who reads my blog, and we've become friends. And he works at Honeywell, and he's occasionally sends me some stuff. It's not inside information. It's all stuff that's just going on, at Honeywell, and but has not made mainstream media news yet. So he sends me this stuff, and he's talking about layoffs, and the last set he was spot on. He got them exactly, and he said the same thing was happening at Boeing, and guess what? It happened at Boeing too, and now he's saying, you know what? We're still seeing orders canceled. We're still struggling, and there's going to be more layoffs in the industry, and people are trying to game this from their pension plan. Do I want to just get the hell out now, or do I want to see how this impacts my pension plan in a month? And everyone's the employees are trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, and that's the talk internally at these companies because of the slowdown. And it's not just aerospace. The last new housing report was actually extremely good, but the existing housing report was very lousy. Median sale price is coming down. It's been falling. Everyone who can afford a house and has one has bought one. Even new home prices have been falling. So they're scraping lower and lower bottom of the barrel here in terms of what they can sell. You see the same thing happening in the auto market. Subprime auto lending has taken off and is one of the big factors driving auto sales. This can only go on as long as the losses don't mount, and I suspect they're going to start to. So here we are, and if the Fed hikes, you're going to have some people like Krugman come out and say, "See, I told you so. The Fed never should have hiked." Blah blah blah. This is all. No matter what happens, it was already baked in the cake. We've built a bubble in stocks. We're back to subprime lending on autos. We've got negative interest rates, and they aren't working, and central banks are doubling down. Swiss National Bank, this was amusing. Did you see what they did the other day, John? Swiss National Bank increased its exposure to Facebook. So it's got hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. equities. Now, does it really make sense for the National Bank of Switzerland to be owning Facebook? It's got a PE of 60. There's going to be write-offs at some point in the future, and there's probably going to not have a PE at all. But even if it does, why should the central bank of Switzerland be buying U.S. equities? And the Bank of Japan is buying them, and the Bank of Japan is buying Japanese equities. Actually, the Bank of Japan is buying so much Japanese equities And pension plans in Japan are buying equities. And the biggest pension plan in Japan lost a mere $53 billion last quarter and over $100 billion in the last year. And analysts came out and they said, what does this mean? This means that Japanese pension plans have room to buy. And someone made the same comment about the Bank of Switzerland. Well, it should buy more Facebook. And they saw little risk to this, Jim. And no one saw any risk when the Swiss National Bank pegged the Swiss franc to the euro. And then there was no risk, and the risk was manageable. That's what they said. The risk was manageable. And guess what happened when the Swiss National Bank took the peg off? There was chaos, literally chaos, in the foreign exchange markets when that happened. It's all craziness.
On the positive side, in New Zealand now, if you want a pizza, they'll deliver it by drone. The first country to do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I don't know what to make of this, Jim. I absolutely see the benefit. There's no question there's an economic benefit to this. I worry about delivery of things like bombs. Imagine 4 pounds of explosives can blow up a bus. So, imagine someone sending, say, 5 of these drones at the White House, or the Pentagon, or the Sears Tower, or any other building, or even just a bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. Why not? I'm not proposing this. I believe my phone calls here are being monitored, so I got to be careful what I'm saying. This is not a proposal. This is a fear that someone actually might attempt to do something like this. So this is totally different from automated cars, self-driving cars, which I think are going to be on the roads within a few years, and I think millions of long-haul truck driving jobs are going to vanish by 2020. There's clearly an economic benefit to using a drone to deliver a pizza instead of sending a car over there. The curious thing about this, they said that the drone delivery of pizza is going to be more expensive initially. Well, who's going to want to order this pizza by drone if it costs more? So I don't get that aspect of it at all. But I would expect the cost aspect to come down over time. But what about the risks of terrorism? What about drones, flying in and trying to blow up things? So I don't know. I'm on the fence on this one. I've not sorted it out. I don't think anyone's sorted this out. The cars can only drive on the road, and they're not going to go off the road. They're not going to go somewhere where they're not programmed to go. They're not going to fly into a building. So the risk of a car is minimal, but the risk of a drone is not. So where does it head, Jim?
Well, ISIS right now is using off-the-shelf drones to direct their artillery fire and do reconnaissance. And I heard a report from the Pentagon that their next strategy is what they call the swarm, where they'll put thousands of drones in the sky to dive down on the enemy. And if there's thousands of them, you can shoot down hundreds, but you won't get them all.
Well, I don't know if anything like that's coming, but, forget about thousands and just think about 8 or 10, each carrying 5 pounds of explosives, all targeting, one weak aspect of a bridge somewhere.
Sure, a delivery from Dynamite Pizza.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know where this sorts out. I would be surprised if we're not working on this already. But do we need anti-drone drones? Do we need thousands of anti-drone drones surrounding the Pentagon and the White House so that no other drones can get in. So, is that where we're headed? I don't know.
Sounds like a new industry.
It sounds like the anti-drone drone. Yes, we need. Jim, I'm serious. I would be shocked if they're not working on that. I've not heard any reports of it.
Mish, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
It's a pleasure to be on, and get your pizza by drone while you still can.
My guest has been Mish Shedlock. Check out Mish's global economic trend analysis on mishtalk.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.